Hi everybody, and welcome to Soul Bites podcast. Everything you need to know about data and AI, the ultimate executive briefing. And I've got a special guest today, obviously the author Ian Mullane. Welcome back, and congratulations on your second white paper. Everything you need to know about data and AI, dropping on June the 14th here in 2021. And this sits on the heels of the Fitness Future, both available, by the way. In the notes below, and you got rave reviews on that last one. It spread wide across the world and really started to educate people in the area of technology. So congratulations on that. Look, your overall goal with a series of white papers is to demystify areas that revolutionize the power of technology to fill in the gaps of understanding. So we're a little bit behind. You've been in other industries, you've witnessed that. You're heavily focused on fitness club management, and using your fintech background. So you've been in all these worlds and you're trying to drag us kicking and screaming into what happens next. We're in the attention economy. Thank you very much, Scott Galloway. And the currency is data. We're surrounded by AI and ML. I get hardcore EDM recommendations on Spotify. You get a whole lot of rom-coms sent to you, Ian, and we both find our way through the world using Waze. So we use this technology already. Why do we, the fitness industry, question AI in the processing of data in our world? Traditionally, it's either been considered data boring or a dark art. Neither of these are healthy or helpful in today's economy. Could you tell us a little bit about the paper? Why did you choose this topic and why now?
I'm still giggling about the rom-com thing because you know what? It's actually true. It really is, right? So, there'll be a few people who know me there who will know that, a good Richard Curtis movie is going to be in my top 5 at any stage, right? So anyway, we'll move on from that very quickly before my reputation is shattered. Very simply, the feedback from the first paper was that it touched the surface of what is quite a broad subject. And rather than taking that to a more advanced level or a more in-depth one, actually wind it back and try and introduce the subject. I think as you said, the subject can be viewed as a dark art, can definitely be viewed as dark and boring. But the reality is that we need to embrace it. And what I tried to set out to do was to put it in a format that would allow people to understand what can be achieved and then how to do it, and then to do so in a way that wasn't difficult, wasn't overly challenging, but would definitely prove to be at least a conversation starter around the things to be looked at and the things to be understood, and then what type of actions could be put in place to actually start implementing items like this. Because I know you're the same. This is still something which people believe to be a large barrier when we're already seeing, and obviously I've got a front row seat on it, an enormous quantity of organizations already rolling out. And I'm eager for that to become broader, particularly as we power ourselves out of what has been a difficult 12 to 18 months for the industry.
Great. So in many ways, it's a how-to, right? And so don't be freaked out about it. Just take those first steps because it's inevitably here, and just, take away those barriers. I love it. You speak of data as an asset. Humans can be inconsistent, unstructured, and unreliable in the management of data. Could you just give us a broad definition? What is data? Where do we find it? And then just unpack some of those terms we hear thrown around, AI data, and that good old 1952 term ML, machine learning.
Okay, fair enough. Right, there's a few of those ones to unpack. So I think data comes in two big formats, structured and unstructured. Let's look at it in the most simplistic terms, that structured data is where it is defined by the format that it's in, and it is something that we can very easily work with. It's actually not the largest percentage of data that's available to us. However, it tends to be the data that we see utilized the most in the club for the more basic elements of it. It's the type of stuff we're going to see in our club management system. It's the type of stuff that we're going to see maybe in our NPS platform. But it is a set of data which is core and it's very valuable. And it is probably what powers, in some cases, maybe your business intelligence or maybe some of those aspects. Unstructured data is exactly what it sounds. Unstructured data is data which doesn't actually comply overall to a format. So for instance, the content within an email message would be a good example on that particular aspect. Or maybe the free-form content that comes in the NPS. Why did you score us? Why did you give us that score? That type of stuff is what we'd class as unstructured. It makes up about 80% of the data that exists within an organization. And it is that data, when we add it into the structured data, which allows us to power an awful lot of the AI insights. Structured data by nature is very easy to interpret. We have tools called SQL tools where we have the capacity to take into databases and then get insights out. But unstructured data isn't as such. And what we require there is, shall we say, another level of tool to be able to see what insights we can find within that unstructured data married to the structured data. And the way we look at doing that is by utilizing machine learning. And as you said, no, machine learning is not new. It's been around for a long, long time. It has come to, shall we say, public attention probably more in the last 10 years, but it's been around since the 50s. And very, very simply, machine learning is where we provide historical data so that a machine can learn the outcomes that we wish. And then by doing so, we give it the capacity on an ongoing basis to look at the data inbound to be able to make predictions. And that's what machine learning is. Machine learning is prediction. It's a prediction machine. We are looking to look at the data we've got, and we use machine learning to then for it to tell us what the answer is for the future.
Great, thanks for that. And so how much value sits in data, and does it need to be perfect for us to get value from it?
So I'll take the second one first there. I don't think anyone has perfect data, and that even goes for an organization like us that knows the importance of it. And that's for two reasons. And that's because with the variety of systems that are in place in most organizations, there'll be different formatting rules around there. There'll be different data capture. We will have different challenges based on geographies as well. In the United Kingdom and in Europe, we've got GDPR and those type of aspects. But then there's the human element. When we have human registration, so for instance, when we've got the member in front of us and they're giving us some feedback, or they're signing up and we're typing it into the keyboard, there can be issues there. Historically, some elements of the data weren't as important as they are now going forward, for instance. So very, very, very rarely, in fact, never, have I ever seen a data set which is perfect. What I would push out,
never have I ever.
5 years ago, yeah, never have I ever. Yeah, exactly. Never have I ever seen a complete data set. But more important than that, 5 years ago, that probably meant that there was going to be some limitations. The tools that exist now for us to be able to take those incomplete data sets, and there's a good example in the paper where we can take that data and we can do the work on it in a fraction of the time. We're talking hours. And even the most complicated, sophisticated, and horrible data sets, days, to be able to turn that into a valuable asset. And why is it valuable? It's valuable because if you take a look at what we're now capable of doing, and when I say we, I'm not just talking about keepme, I'm talking about organizations that are working in this area today, around prediction, around insights, which wouldn't be remotely possible using business intelligence or even human domain expertise. It comes from the data. So as an organization, and try to push this in the paper, I really want people to look at data as an asset class. I want them to understand that even if it's not blindingly apparent about the value they can extract from it now, they should understand that in 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, and 5 years, nobody is going to wish they had less of it. And nobody is going to wish that they hadn't had a tighter data policy or understanding about the value it could be bringing as an organization.
Great, thanks. How do I know as a business owner if AI is for me?
I think there's a number of simple tests, but one of the ones which I like to use myself with my business is that I look at the historical metrics that drive my business. And I say to myself, if I had the capacity or the capability to predict what they would be in 3 months, 6 months, or 12 months' time, how would that change the way that I could run my business? So if I had, for instance, a more transparent understanding of the likely true retention that I would have, the true sales that I would have, if I could have a better visibility of the non-due secondary spend, how would that allow me to run the business better? Would it allow me to make some capital investments earlier? Would it allow me to get my staffing right? Would it allow me to change my marketing mix to be able to align that? All of these things are possible by utilizing the prediction machine, which is AI. And therefore, at the most simplistic level, if there are core elements and metrics which I drive the business to on a day-to-day basis that's historical, probably that means that I hold the data to make it future, because the historical data is what trains the machine learning going future. So take a look at those business metrics. See within there, what would I like to know with a good certainty, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 24 months visibility of, and how could I then utilize it? That's the best way, I think, to start understanding whether AI is for you.
Great. And you bring up that magic word prediction, which is essentially where the puck is going, right? And that's pretty much, it's the gold mine, right? That's where we're all trying to go. In your paper, you've got a great quote: businesses that capture value in their data will be the ones with the highest retention, lowest acquisition costs, and happiest customers. Can you take those fine examples you gave just then, maybe glean some insights from existing customers, and just tell us in real terms, how have they capitalized on those insights? How have they, what are some of the changes, the business metrics that have shifted because of using AI?
I think that the main reason why they have such a large impact is two main areas. That when we have those insights, that means that we've got the capacity to personalize the experience that we're looking to give to the member, that we can start moving, shall we say, a less personalized product onto a more hyper-personalized way. So an example and a case study that's available on our website would be Willows, which was a club that has always had a data-centric approach, but more of a historical aspect until they brought it through with KeepMe. And what they found in their use of KeepMe, even at its most earliest stages, was that they immediately were able to work on attrition to a huge impact to the business, because unlike understanding whether there was a probability that that member would be there in 30 days' time, they had the capacity to work out if that member would be there in 9 months' time. And that extension on the runway at the first level allowed them to understand what they needed to get done prior to that period of time. To convert that into pure value, the lifetime value for that business has gone up in membership of 1 year. It's phenomenal amount of performance. And again, I would like to point out that when we're providing those type of services, we get the halo effect. But what it effectively is happening there is an incredibly competent team is using that insight to go and take action, right? So taking on AI will predict where your problem is. You still have the necessity to go and take the action. And, in some cases, many of them see that the first stage should be enough, and it's just not, right? Other aspects of it as well is, when you're receiving these predictive insights, you've then got the capacity to make changes prior to the impact to the business. So for instance, if you're starting to see that one of your sales channels is generating the leads necessary, but the cost per member acquisition is increasing exponentially, and the lifetime value of the members coming in from that channel is not to the value that you want it to be, then you've got the ability to change the mix. Same customer, not only even in their very first few weeks of utilizing the platform around the sales channel, was able to see an increase in their sales performance of 8%. That's not immaterial when it comes to understanding the actual revenue implications. Again, when you're utilizing this type of technology to personalize the engagement with the individual members, the probability of them in turn re-engaging with you is very, very high. Again, this organization in December had their greatest non-due secondary revenue spend month with their client base. And when they looked at it, it started with the fact that they got their highest open rate in engagement through digital ever. And that was because there was a level of personalization well beyond using name or any of those aspects, which was driven from the AI. So as any organization that's approaching this should look at it as follows. If you have got increased insights around your core revenue metrics and you then proactively take action and put into place process, and we haven't even gone into automation where you can get this done for you, then there is always going to be opportunities for improvement. Nobody should get engaged with this type of technology unless they're going to be able to see a return on the investment. And in most cases, unless they are an incredibly high performing organization with retention at 95% and zero slippage in their sales leads, they're going to see it. But not just that. They're going to see a great deal of operational efficiencies, which will allow them to run the business smoother. It will allow them to run it more optimally. It will allow it to have better insights on what actually matters. So they're focusing on actions, which will drive revenue, drive engagement, drive retention, and decrease what looks like work that may be doing so, but in reality isn't.
Great answer. Thanks for that. Look, there's always watch outs in the technology space. So perhaps could you cover off some of those? I guess the risk of not moving would be part of that.
You know what, the risk that we see the most is the risk of not actually utilizing what you see and taking action. I remember when we first produced the dashboard, the excitement from people. They looked at that dashboard, they said it was absolutely phenomenal. And then I'd phone them back and I said, how's it going? Well, not a great deal. Like, well, any chance you could, give us an idea of the tools we could use, right, to actually get it. So we built the tools to do it. We go back to them, we say, we're not seeing you using the tools, right? Is there any chance there's the possibility you could guide us on what actions we should actually be taking from those insights? Right, okay, fair enough. So we did it, take action tiles, and still quite a little bit of resistance in area. And then you phone them back, any chance you could just do it for us, right? And the reality is that when we look at organizations which are seeing double-digit increases in their sales conversions, double-digit increases in their retention improvements, these are organizations which are seeing this as the missing piece for them to take action. They are slaughtering their holy cows, shall we say, whereby they may have processes in place, they may have beliefs in place about it's always worked for us, and this is one of the core things we do as an organization. But when they have those insights suggesting to them there's a more optimal path, they're having the confidence to go out and actually do it. So I think one of the major challenges that organizations will face when they come to dealing with these type of things is the fact that it's going to present them with certainty that they've never had before. And it means that they are probably going to have to take away some of the processes and beliefs, and indeed some of the, the comfort that maybe they had previously around stuff, and replace it with stuff which can be measurable. But nevertheless, whenever you make radical change, there's not always, shall we say, it's received well by everybody.
Great. So you're talking about some culture change. You're also talking about the power of execution. Take us behind the scenes. What's a couple of watch outs behind the scenes? I'm sort of thinking platforms or systems I might be using, some legacy stuff, and then perhaps the role of APIs as well going forward.
Okay, well, yeah, I think you've hit them both perfectly there. So one of the major challenges, and one of the biggest things I try to push out in the paper, is that there's a huge necessity to make sure that any purchases made going forward actually have APIs. I am still seeing platforms. I'm seeing platforms which are new platforms that are being pushed out and they do not have APIs. Now, very, very simply, about going into what an API is in detail, your data is a prisoner unless there is an API. The API is going to give us, anybody who wants to work with the data, a structured way to get that data out and then to be able to utilize it. If you do not have an API, there are methodologies to be able to make sure that your data can still be worked with, but it's restrictive. It's kind of, just think about your dial-up modem relative to your dial-up internet that you had in the past relative to your fiber full-blown power that you have these days. Huge difference. So API is something which I would be making sure was absolutely at the top of list of any purchase you're making, whether it be in your club management system, whether it be on your MPS platform, your automated marketing platform, whatever it may be. And being told there is an API is not enough. Any API that is available will have documentation for it. And it is not in any way confidential. It's not something they should be holding to themselves. It's something which you can ask for and they should be able to present, because the whole purpose of it is to give third parties the opportunity to integrate and extract the value to promote the data that you've got within the platform on that side. I'd say that with that said, there will be platforms which are legacy and they do have challenges on there. I would be, and again, I need to point out that, in 2 years' time, we would expect data to be flowing through the enterprise, left, right, and center, both way. We'd want to expect it to be dynamically. We would expect it to be seamless, right? In all intents and purposes. So therefore, look now at where the blockages are. Look now at what platforms you've got in place are not going to be able to do it. How many of you have got 5-year-old legacy platforms, 10-year-old legacy platforms, right? They may have managed to creep on so that they look like they've developed. But if the reality is that the only way you can get your data out is by downloading a CSV file or using their report writer, you've probably got some issues. And that's something which I would want to be addressing with the organization now, because realistically, any organization that has an expectation to play a part now and for the going forward 10 years couldn't possibly expect to do so without the ability for the customer to utilize and free up their data in these type of tools. And therefore, I would want to know, not only is it on the roadmap, when is it going to be delivered and in what format, and evidence that, because otherwise I'd probably be making quite aggressive moves to look at how I would replace that over the next 12 to 18 months. Because as I've said many times, at the moment, maybe competitive advantage currently, it's going to be competitive necessity within 12 months, particularly at the rate of adoption that we're seeing in the market.
Thanks, Ian. Club owners and business owners out there, you have been warned. Get moving. Right, let's address some common questions and dispel some common myths. Can bad AI beat a great expert?
Can bad AI? It depends how bad it is. Listen, I think that don't get me involved in statistics. I get far too excited when it comes to this type of stuff, right? So realistically, if we want to go into probabilities and a whole host of other things, the way I look at it is when we are dealing with domain expertise, we're probably looking at do they get it right or wrong? They normally are about a 50 to 65% right. And that's 50% is good expert, up to 65 and this is when we're dealing with things like retention or sales type of things. We can then take it to the next level, which is statistic modeling, probably 75%. And then a bad AI is probably, and a bad AI, I don't think there's a concept of a bad AI. Okay, let me unwind this, right? If you wanted to understand the accuracy of an AI, you should never, ever have to deploy it without actually knowing what the score is. And I go into some detail in the paper, but let me explain how it happens. You give me 2 years worth of your data, right? You give me 100% of your data. I take 80% of that to train the model. And in the model sees all the data and it can also see the outcomes, right? So it knows whether they stayed or whether they goes, right? Having done it, I can then take the data which doesn't have the outcomes, the final 20%, and then run that through the model. And then the model can tell me whether they stay or whether they go, as an example in the retention model. With that being the case, because I know those outcomes, I can see how accurate it is. We wouldn't deploy a model. You don't get a bad AI, you get a bad data set, right? And the work should be done on the data set to get there. In the market, I'm aware of probably some AIs which are running at 83 to 85% accuracy on 6 month to 9 month horizons. We would normally deploy at the 94, 96% levels. But if the data set is poor and it's still well beyond the human intervention level, which is, anything up to 65, 70% at best, you deploy because A, it's better, but B, remember, the clue's in the name, it's machine learning. So from then onwards, it's constantly looking at the outcomes and it's constantly changing and it's got the live data. So you would expect incremental improvements over the period. Not massive, you're not going to go from 83 to 95 in a month or even a year, but you will constantly get better and you'll know you'll always be better than your human intervention side.
Yeah, and I think that's the point, isn't it? Be very impressed by the delta that's already there, the 20, 30% just between good and starting to learn. I think that's kind of the point there. Is all data created equal?
You know what? Yes, in many cases it is, but it's what value is. It depends on what you're trying to predict. But here's another one, which I don't think people are aware of, is that when a customer comes to us and then they say, we've got this whole host of data, we've got the club management system, we've got the payment system, we've got our MailChimp, we've got all of these different data sources. We'll take them all, right? With an API available, we'll take them all in, because the first thing that's done in the model is to define what the value is of these particular elements of data, right? We call them features within the actual data set to do it. So we can come back and say to them, yep, thank you very much, of no real value. We're still capturing just in case that changes. But currently, for us to get to 95% of the results, we require this data set, these data items. Everything else is immaterial at that stage. It's 0.000 of the overall sum. It's not really of that relevance. So my statement outwards is as follows: just don't have an opinion. Allow the people who are building the model to let the model tell them what is valuable. If you've got it, give it, right? If it's dirty, if it's a pain in the backside, if it's incomplete, whatever else it may be, that's not your problem. Allow that to be, our problem, the expert's problem on that side, and we'll make those aspects of it, because what comes out of it is also a better understanding yourself. From now onwards, could you make sure you do take that field a little bit more seriously? That element there where you've only been capturing for the last 6 months and you've only been doing it on 2 sites, could you do it across all 5 sites now? Because that's going to have a material effect.
What is the great advantage between me, the expert, I've been in the industry, 10, 20, 30 years, whatever, I've seen stuff, versus you bring in AI, you bring in ML, what happens in terms of a decision-making process, and what is the size of the data? You've already talked about combining structured and unstructured. What is the exponential value, I guess, that data can bring that me, the expert, observing life in real time, doesn't have?
I can sit down with an expert and I can say to them, right, so this is our membership currently. I'm going to use retention. It's an easy one to do. Here is this particular membership. Could you give me the which people you think are not going to be there? And, a domain expert is going to go through a list of 1,000 people, and they're probably going to apply some rules. They're going to say, well, if they've not been active in the last 30 days, I think there's a probability they won't be with us if they're coming up for renewal in the next 10 days, right? If they've not been active in the last 60 days, then I think we can, with some confidence, say that their renewal is not likely to come through, right? That's human expertise. That's common sense, you could argue, but then they can also apply some other things, right? So if they're at that site, or if they're students, for instance, and universities just starting, or particularly in the seasonal clubs where the summer memberships are starting to fall out, that's great, right? But there's 2 things with that, right? First and foremost, humans do tend to have an optimism bias, thank God, right? They've got an optimism bias, right? So by that aspect of it, there are going to be human failings in those particular ones, right? They'll also apply generalists. Why? Because if you've got 1,000 members or 100,000 members, you can't use human domain expertise to be able to do evaluations on this particular side. They will also look at particular data points. Did they attend last 30? Did they attend in the last 60? And whilst that's perfectly valid, there are numerous other aspects out there. So moving to permutations, which is the point here, is that when an AI gets it, it doesn't care about domain expertise. It has no interest. I'm constantly told by my data science team that as well when I try to voice any opinions. It looks at every single data item that it's possibly got. And on 45 data items, which is the common number I tend to utilize, which is going to be age, gender, lead source, activity, these type of items, an AI will generate 8.8 million decision trees to come to the answer for each individual member. And it's going to do that on a daily basis. Now, that's the difference between the 50 to 51 and the 60 to 65 and the 75 to 85 and the 90, etc. But that's not the primary thing which I would want it done for. The AI's difference here is that it's not looking at people that are going to leave in the next 30 days or 60 days. It's giving you that accuracy beyond human with 9 months and 10 months. So if Emma joined in February, it's telling me now that I need to be on alert that there's a high probability she will not be with me in December. And the difference as an operator, the difference as someone who's having to run this as a business, is that I've got that runway to then go and change that outcome. Because the difference, again, between the human and the AI here is that you can tell me with 100% accuracy that all of these members are going to leave in the next 30 days, but I can't do anything about it. They've been disengaged for such a long period that, apart from me being able to throw some ridiculous commercial offer and just, spray and hope effectively, then I'm not going to get it. But in this case with the AI, it's February. The actual thing is Emma probably doesn't know that she's going to leave in December. She doesn't realize that she's being tagged for that. And that allows me to put in place a much more gradual professional engagement level. That's the difference. And that is the permutations.
Great. Then I'm just going to get a bit selfish for a moment here. You've also done some work in group exercise, which is my great passion. Things like being able to optimize a schedule to link that to retention, right? Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, well, you see, this is the thing, right? So we all have both class. We also have, obviously, the individuals teaching the class, and then we have things like class schedules, right? So what we've got the capacity to do is if we take the membership and we take the class schedule and we take the outcomes we've been seeing over a period of time, what we can do is we can actually ask the AI to actually model the optimal retention schedule. Now, some, by the way, will go for the optimal attendance schedule. That's different, by the way, and in certain large facilities, there can be a great relevance to doing that. But again, we should never put one value as the ultimate, right? So optimal attendance does not mean optimal retention, right? Optimal attendance can actually be bad retention because there's too many people. But yes, what the AI can then do is it can take a look at the schedule, it can even take a look at your instructors, and it can optimally apply the class scheduling along with the class personnel available. And then not only that, give you what the effective retention improvement would be should you implement this, and then highlight the members who would be adversely affected that would also be, shall we say, borderline. So, if there was 20% of them that you were never going to keep anyway, then it can show you who they are, but it could also show you a number that may. And that then means that we're optimized for retention, but we've also got the capacity to engage on a one-to-one basis with those on the end of the long tail, which are not going to benefit from this, but we would probably still want to make an effort for because we've still got a good opportunity to keep them.
Absolutely riveting. This has been fantastic. Final question. So you're working at the frontier of AI for the fitness industry. You're playing with something called unsupervised learning at KeepMe. Could you explain what that is and why that matters for our industry?
Well, to be fair, we'd start to implement both, to be quite frank. So, we've started, it's logical on what the definitions are and those particular ones. It's to what degree are we inputting, to what degree are we refining? Machine learning is a very easy concept to understand. And what I'm trying to build at the moment is a confidence within the industry and the operators that once they understand it, they'll be more willing to embrace it. I don't think yet that I should be going on my pulpit and talking about deep learning, neural networks, and a whole host of other stuff, which we already employ to get some of the very specific models that for some of our advanced customers that are very eager to deploy that out. But there's a note for people out there. There are already operators that are working off neural networks and deep learning so that they have the capacity to be able to see stuff, particularly around unstructured data, and so that they can make those particular aspects. So what I see going forward in the marketplace is that supervised learning, unsupervised learning will be replaced with effectively what is the business outcome. And this is what I would say to every operator. do not worry about how it actually happens, unless you've got a huge desire to get involved in Bayesian logic and calculus and the rest of it, right? Learn about what are the metrics, learn about what is necessary for you to have a successful project. Control the elements that you have, because once it's delivered to you as a project, you can very quickly see whether it's actually working or not, because the outputs are always measurable. Am I making more sales based off those recommendations? Am I holding more members? Am I seeing a higher attendance? Am I doing more PT? All of these elements come through it. So I would suggest that my paper, and this is the purpose, the paper was there to educate people to the level that they can have a confidence and engage with a professional in this area. But I've tried to deliberately make sure that it is only enough, and it is not going off into the areas which are more about keeping me happy than they are in actually educating the people, which I'm hoping will find the value in this paper.
Great, thank you. And I'm sorry I took you down that rabbit hole, but I wanted to close on the point that I opened with, and that is, everywhere around us, this stuff is happening already. And all those people in adjacent industries are beginning to pile into ours. So it really is to have that macro awareness that it's happening anyway. Let's catch up. I think it's a really positive thing. And also something we said before we actually started recording here was also make sure that someone on your board is really understanding the world of technology, because we are in this era. So if you look at your board members right now, the people guiding and governing the future of your business, make sure that you have someone that you can partner with who can guide you in these areas. You don't need to know it all, but you do need to know the good direction. So Ian, I wanted to thank you. You've got a bunch of speaking engagements, keynotes, you'll have a million webinars and podcasts and stuff coming up. So congratulations on that. I know that you'll be at some of the big events in Europe and here in the US and in Canada, to our friends in CanFit Pro, etc. Thank you. And I know in the white paper, and you did it earlier in the piece here as well, you reference automation. I'm taking that as a possible topic for the next white paper, which no pressure.
What a lovely segue. Thanks for that one, Emma.
I expect you to deliver that in the next few months. Look, I thank you. I know what it's like to run a business and then also write alongside that. It is an incredible amount of work. Thank you for helping us to demystify the space. It's well needed and we need to get going. And people can reach out to you. You've got our details down the bottom there. Thank you so much, Ian. Have a fantastic season as we start to bring the businesses back. And hopefully this has piqued a little bit of interest around technology, data, AI, and what you need to know. Thank you so much. We'll chat again soon.
Thanks very much, Emma.